Amid the calls for decolonization, a remarkable voice has risen from Europe, demanding justice for Africa.
Vive senza elettricità! Non ci venire a fare lezioni, Macron!
Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, with unwavering passion, has become a beacon of hope, advocating for the freedom of African nations from Western exploitation.
Hello, beautiful people. Now, welcome back to the channel. I hope you're doing good. And as usual, it is my greatest pleasure to have you on the channel. So in today's episode, I want us to talk about a video that I came across recently that I thought it's worth sharing. Now, this video is the Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgia Meloni, basically confronting the President of France, Emmanuel Macron. And what I did find peculiar, or rather maybe fascinating on this video, is the fact that, sometimes in the unlikeliest of places, a beam of hope arises. I know that the liberation of Africa is our business as Black people, but there are a lot more that we can learn from, such, exposés, I can call. So without wasting much of your time, I want us to jump right into the video. After watching the video, we'll come and give our reaction on the same. So let's jump into into the video.
In the heart of Africa, a battle rages, a battle for true independence, free from the shadows of colonialism that have lingered for far too long.
How do we reposition Africa as an equal partner in the geopolitics of this world?
Amid the calls for decolonization, a remarkable voice has risen from Europe, demanding justice for Africa.
Vive senza elettricità! Non ci venire a fare lezioni, Macron!
Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, with unwavering passion, has become a beacon of hope, advocating for the freedom of African nations from Western exploitation.
This is called the CFA franc. It is the colonial currency that France prints for 14 African nations. This is a child who works in a gold mine in Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso is one of the poorest nations in the world. Despite having gold, France prints colonial money for Burkina Faso, and in exchange, demands that 50% of everything Burkina Faso exports ends up in the French treasury coffers. What this child crawls into a tunnel to extract ends up mostly in the coffers of the French state. So, the solution is not to take Africans and move them to Europe. The solution is to free Africa from certain Europeans who exploit it and allow these people to live off what they have.
In Burkina Faso, one of the world's poorest countries, the harsh reality of this exploitation is laid bare.
Emmanuel Macron has called us disgusting. And here, the Italian press says, since Macron said that we are irresponsible shame. The responsible ones, Emmanuel and Macron, are those who bombed Libya because they were annoyed that Italy had a privileged relationship in the energy field with Gaddafi, exposing us to the migration chaos in which we find ourselves.
Sono I francesi che mandano la gendarmerie a rispedire indietro qualunque immigrato tenti di passare il confine a 20 miglia.
Disgusting are those like France who continue to exploit Africa by printing money for 14 African nations on which they apply seigneurage. Making children work in the mines extracting raw materials.
A sfruttare l'Africa, stampando moneta per 14 nazioni africane sulle quali applica il signoraggio, facendo lavorare bambini nelle miniere estraendo materie prime, come accade in Niger, dove la Francia estrae il 30% dell'uranio che gli serve a far
As
camminare
it
le
happens
centrali
in
nucleari, e il
Niger,
90%
France
dei
extracts
nigeriani
clay
vive
for a
senza
percent of the
elettricità.
uranium it needs to run nuclear
Non ci
power
venire a
plants,
fare
while
lezioni,
90%
Macron,
of the poor live
perché
without
l'Africa
electricity.
scappa
Don't
da
come to give
voi.
us lessons,
E la
Macron, because
soluzione
Africa
non
is running
è
away from
spostare
you.
gli africani
And
in
the
Europa
solution is
e
not to move
liberare
the Africans
l'Africa
to
da
Europe,
certi
but to free
europei.
Africa from certain
Non
Europeans.
accettiamo lezioni. Chiaro?
Children, small enough to crawl into the narrow tunnels of gold mines, labor in the dark, their hands gathering the precious metal that will never benefit their homeland. Instead, half of everything they extract ends up in the coffers of the French treasury, a cruel reminder of the CFA France's stranglehold on their country.
In my speech at Atreju is a demonstration that takes place in the month of September. It ended up on the websites of a series of Pan-Africanist associations. Let's say they are African patriots who fight against the CFA franc. In my speech, I mentioned the problem of Macron's France and the CFA franc. There is another interview of mine on at least 2 television programs. We went 20 miles to do a demonstration when Macron brought back the CFA franc. For which, I mean, there is a historian who speaks, if Macron will call her to go to Paris first to me, and then to Macron. Now, these CFA francs, I have them here with me. I have also studied a little. They are used by 14 African countries that I am going to read: Cameroon, Central African Republic, Congo, Gabon, Chad, Benin, Burkina Faso, Ivory Coast, Guinea-Bissau, Mali, Niger, Senegal, and Togo. Perfect. I say these countries send few migrants because we have done some calculations. The bulk of migrants in Italy come from Tunisia, Eritrea, Iraq, and Nigeria. The Ivory Coast is the only one that sends us a total of 1,064 migrants out of 23,370, but it is 8th on the list of countries. So are we really sure that the point is this, or is it instead a way to identify an enemy who is then a very good enemy for the sovereigntists because Macron is really the anti-province par excellence? Perfect. I say these countries send few migrants because we have done some calculations. The bulk of migrants in Italy come from Tunisia, Eritrea, Iraq, and Nigeria. The Ivory Coast is the only one that sends us a total of 1,064 migrants out of 23,370, but it is 8th on the list of countries. So, first point, when I brought up the CFA franc, I did it in response to the fact that Macron had called us disgusting because we were making policies to control our migratory flows. So maybe it is worth reminding this nice gentleman that before giving such lapidary judgments towards his European partners, he should remember how France behaves towards these people. You can't tell others that they are not welcoming enough when you print money for 14 nations and apply seniorage. Because what Mauritine didn't explain to her before, when he told us that it is only a system of exchanges, is that this left, which is there defending neo-colonialism, is a reminder of what the Italian left is today. Because I shudder in front of the articles in Repubblica. Today, Merlot in Repubblica calls me the Queen of Catona because I allowed myself to explain that in Africa there's still a neo-colonial problem. Because what does Merlot care? That in his Roman, Italian, and Parisian living rooms, this problem doesn't exist. I'll go and explain it to the associations of Africans who flee, who denounce, and who burn the CFA franc in the square for what it produces. France is a benefactor in Africa, Meriton told us. Let me put it this way. In exchange for this exchange system, France demands that these nations pay into the coffers of the French treasury the equivalent of 50% of their exports. In Burkina Faso, I found out that $1 billion is more or less equal to 10 billion. In Burkina Faso, excuse me, where are the children? I showed the other evening a photo of a child. I will show it to you too. This is a child who works in a gold mine in Burkina Faso. They use children to work in these gold mines because they can get into the tunnels better, okay? 50% of the gold that this child enters a tunnel to extract ends up in the French treasury. Now, does that seem like a normal thing to you? And look, don't come and tell me, and I'll tell you two other very quick things. But no one from these nations. But what does that mean? It's obvious that if a Nigerian escapes from Nigeria, if he had a rich Senegal next to him, maybe he wouldn't come to Italy. GFAT asked off the air about the 10 billion because I had read this thing. He answered me that the 10 billion are not things that could be used by Africans to invest in roads, bridges, infrastructures, but they are the reserves that every country must have. So France tells them, you have these reserves, I'll keep them for you to maintain a stable currency so that it does not fluctuate continuously, and for your economy, it is a great good. Give me a break. Let's do it like this. Okay, then I'll tell Maritain that we do it like this. Since the French are benefactors with their CFA francs, let's say that now we do it with the European Central Bank, what France does. Let's see if France is in agreement.
Nel 2015 il Dipartimento di Stato americano pubblica 3.000 mail, se ricorda, che erano indirizzate all'allora segretario di Stato americano Hillary Clinton.
Mirta, there is another thing I would like to discuss with you today, which I find very interesting. What does the CFA franc have to do with the migration issue? And is France a benefactor or merely interested in the CFA franc? Because they are telling us that France does not gain anything from it.
Africana che si basava sulla moneta libica. Secondo quello che scrivono in questa
The solution to Africa's plight is not migration, it is liberation. It is about freeing Africa from the grip of those who have exploited it for centuries, allowing its people to finally thrive on their own terms. The words of Meloni resonate powerfully across continents as she confronts those who would keep Africa in chains, reminding the world that the true path to justice lies in Africa's freedom.
Okay, now, I said that, this Italy or Italian Prime Minister would be one of those unlikeliest places that, the black person or Africans or people of color are going to expect someone, to really be for them. Because if any country in Europe, is leading the list in being in the worst books for people of color and especially black people, then it is Italy. But here, you can hear that the Prime Minister of Italy is confronting the counterpart from France, the President of France, Emmanuel Macron. But really, what I would want to say that before the black person jumps in to celebrate on how Italy is fighting for black people or for Africa, I want us to get a little context. Now, this argument and counter-argument is coming on a backdrop of an accusation Emmanuel Macron had made, pointing a finger towards Italy. And this had to do with, the reception of African migrants across the Mediterranean Sea. Now, the first thing that we need to know is that Italy is actually the arrival destination of African migrants doing that dangerous and perilous journey across the Mediterranean, because it is the European country that borders the Mediterranean to the south. And so there was a lot of upheaval on, the stringent measures that Italy and what other countries there? There's Spain, on not being so good at receiving African migrants. And now this seemed to not sit well with Emmanuel Macron. Now, so Italy was retaliating by exposing, because this is kind of like an expose, and telling France to the face what it's also doing to the black people. Now, it's the brothers are fighting, and whenever brothers are in an argument, it is the neighbors and the people around that benefit from the argument, because they are going to spew their secrets and and tell each other this and that. Now we know that, first of all, that each year hundreds, and in fact into thousands of African migrants die doing that dangerous journey across the Sahara Desert and across the Mediterranean Sea, trying to cross over to Europe, in the hope of greener pastures over onto the other side. And we also need to know that it's not a warm reception over the other side. That Africans are going to cross, and after they're done with that dangerous journey, they're going to be received and given food and cloth and shelter and hope and jobs and money. No, that's not the case. Sometimes they are put in kind of like concentration camps, in refugee camps, and they stay there for years, without getting any help. Now, others manage to get asylum permits or asylum passes, and others just literally sneak out of the refugee camps and try to find a life, and cross over to the rest of the countries in Europe. Now, the truth is, Africans suffer, and one of the biggest problems that Africans have at home and away is the grip of imperialism, is the grip of after the aftermath of colonization. Look, actually, we call it the aftermath, but we know that Africa is technically still under the grip of colonization, or rather the grip of the Western world. Africa is not free, because for as long as you're able to, by whatever means and by whatever proxies, you're still in control of a country's resources and economical well-being and their leadership, and even sometimes their social welfare, then you are still in control of those people, and that is exactly what the West does with Africa. Africa is still heavily under the grip of the Western powers. Now, in this video, Giorgia Meloni exposes how France is still having a chokehold on West Africa especially. And this does apply to all other former colonial powers of different countries in Africa. Now, I think what we need to learn here, and what the black people need to take advantage of, is in such situations when brothers are pulling back and forth and shouting at each other, then it is our best opportunity to try and free ourselves from the chokes, from the holds, from the grip of them, because the truth is, Africa and the African resources do not benefit the black people. And usually in this channel, I often say, when I refer to Africa, I refer to black people in whatever part of the world they are in. See, for example, what she exposes, and this we have exposed so many times, that Niger is, the biggest producer of uranium. Uranium is powering countries in the West, but Niger itself is in the dark. They do not have electricity. The gold in Burkina Faso has never benefited Africans. And we're not only talking about Burkina Faso and Niger, we're talking about the Congo, we're talking about Nigeria, we're talking about Senegal, we're talking about Kenya, we're talking about South Africa. We're literally talking about every single country in Africa and its resources. They do not get the fair share or make anything out of our resources. Now, we know that currently we have the association of the Sahel states, led by Burkina Faso and Mali and of course and Niger, and that deliberately took this bold move to cut ties with France, and France has never, in Senegal as well, and France has never been happy with this. Not only France, but the entire Europe, because as we usually see, it's monkey see, monkey do. Now, any other African country is going to consider this move. Now, so what we can learn from this video is we can take advantage of such information, that when they are shouting at each other, it is our time to take advantage of their crisis to free ourselves from it. If they themselves are coming out today to call at each other, to call out at each other for the atrocities they have done to Africa, then it is high time that the African person actually comes to terms with the truth that this is what these people did to us and to our ancestors. And that the most important bit of that video we need to realize is when Giorgia Meloni says, you see, the many Africans that take on that dangerous journey, that die in their thousands every year crossing the Mediterranean Sea, need not be doing that journey if Africa is liberated and free and enjoying from the fruits of its land and its resources. We are only going to Europe because all our resources are being stolen, embezzled, and exploit and taken to the West. And now we have nothing left for us. We scramble for food, and we find ourselves in such situation. If black people are given a chance to enjoy the fruits of their labor and the fruits of their land, we never have a single African doing that dangerous journey across the Sahara and across the dangerous waters of the Mediterranean Sea. Now it's time for Africans and black people across the world, in Africa, in the diaspora, to realize that the only reason why black people are in this situation is because someone else does not want you to enjoy fully the fruits of your land and of your labor. Wake up, black people, and fight for yourself. I often say that Africa is for Africans and Africa is our business. It's time that all of us come together, stop the narrative of fragmentation. Stop thinking of yourself as African American. Stop thinking of yourself as more African than those that are living in the diaspora. Stop thinking of yourself as Jamaican, as Caribbean, as South American, as European from Africa. And let's come together as a black culture and stand our ground, fight for our position. And by doing so, we will liberate ourselves economically, politically, and even socially. It's time for Africa and black people to wake up and rise up to the truth. Know that if we were able to get a fair remuneration from our resources, even half, 50% of what Africa produces, Africa would be living the best life, or black people would be having the best life ever. So yeah, that is what I had for this video. Please share your thoughts and your opinions in the comments, and like this video, share this video. Most importantly, subscribe to this channel if you haven't yet. Until next time, see you in the next video. Peace.